I'm Keplar, and today I'm going to be turning this 2D logo into this interesting 3D logo with Blender. Let's get straight into it. So once you're in Blender, press Shift A and go down to Image and Reference. Then you want to go and find where your reference image is, the one you want to use. Mine is located in this file here, and it is called Blender Logo Edited. Then you can just press Load Reference Image, and the image will be located in your viewport. Once you have your image in here, you need to press Shift A again and go to Mesh and then select Circle. Now you've got the circle in your viewport, and there's just one thing you need to do before editing it. Go down to this drop down here and make sure that this is 64. If it's not 64, then you can just delete it and change it to 64. That will make sure that your circle is of high enough quality so that it looks good when you render it. Now you want to scale your circle down so that it fits inside the circle in the middle. So you need to press S and Shift to scale it down slowly. And if you want to move it, then you can press G and move it to the middle. Now you can zoom in to make sure that it's in the middle. And if it's not, you can press G again and Shift to move it slowly, or S to scale it a bit more if you want to. And now you want to do the same thing for the outside ring. And so you can press Tab to go into edit mode and just make sure that you're in the edit mode in the corner there. And then you can press Shift and D to duplicate it and S to scale it. And that will scale the circle out. You can also press Shift to scale it slowly and more precisely, like that. You want to make sure that your entire outside ring is selected, and then you can press E and S to extrude and scale it outwards. And you can also press Shift to make it more precise. And then you've got your entire outside ring filled in. And the next step is to separate the two rings, and you do this by selecting the inside ring, so pressing Alt and then clicking on it, and then press P and select Selected in the drop down. Now you can see that your inside ring has disappeared from this viewport, but you can still go back into object mode and edit it that way. The next step is to trace around these little jotty out bits. So what you want to do is press Ctrl R to make a loop cut here in this box. So Ctrl R and like that. And now you can move that to where the joint is, and that's your loop cut done. You want to do that for the other ones as well. Ctrl R and move it. And Ctrl R. And one more time, Ctrl R. Now that we've got that done, we can actually trace around the shapes themselves. So you can zoom back in to one of those jotty out bits, and you can select one of the vertices or the little points that we've just created, and you can press E to extrude them out, and you can also press Shift here to make it more precise and put it just before where the curve starts at the end. You also want to do the same on the other side, so E and Shift, and just before the curve you drop it. Then we'll trace the curve by selecting your vertice and pressing E and Shift and just sort of tracing around the shape like that. E and extrude, E and extrude, E and extrude. It doesn't mind if you don't quite follow the shape precisely, because you can always edit it afterwards by pressing G. So just do this around the entire shape. And then when you get to the last 2 points, you can box select them both and press F to fill. As you can see, I haven't traced my curve perfectly, but that's fine because I can select one of these vertices and I can press G and Shift to move it. I could spend a lot of time making sure that these are all perfect, but it doesn't really matter as it wouldn't affect the end result much. And now we just need to do exactly the same thing for the other two. The next step is to press C to bring out this little circle here, and left click and drag over all of the vertices in this shape. It's important to make sure that you have all of your vertices selected, so check by zooming in. It's important that you do this because if you don't have all your vertices selected or have extra vertices selected, the next step will not work. Now that you have all of your vertices selected, you can press F to fill in that face, and again repeat for the other two. Now that you have your outside ring fully filled in with faces, you can move on to the inside ring. So press Tab to go into object mode, select the inside ring, and press Tab again to go back into edit mode. Now you can select all of the vertices by pressing A to select all, and then F to fill in the face. Now you can tab back into object mode. Now select both of the objects by clicking on one, then shift clicking on the other so that they're both selected here in the menu. You can now tab into edit mode with both the objects so that you can give them thickness. Press A to select all and then go to the side view position here. As you can see, our logo is totally flat from the Z axis. And as you did on a 3D logo after all, you can press E and Z to extrude from the Z direction, and Control to scale it in steps. Now as you can see, we have a 3D model of the logo, and you can solidify this by pressing the solid view mode in the viewport editor. If you zoom in, you can see the individual faces here. To correct this, you can right-click and press Shade Smooth by Angle in the drop-down. As you can see, the faces are now a lot less visible. Now before we give this some colour, we can move down this reference image and select the central circle and go down to the Materials tab. In this tab you can press New, and in this colour tab here, with the eyedropper, you can select the colour from our reference image. But as you can see, we can't actually see the colour in this viewport mode, which is because we are only in the solid view mode. We can go to the semi-rendered view mode, and now we can see the colours. Now we can repeat the same process for the outside circle by making a new colour, and with the eyedropper, we can select the colour from the reference image. Now that our logo has colour, we don't really need the reference image anymore, so we can delete that. Now we need a background image, so you can add that in by pressing Shift A. And then in Mesh, you can go to Plane. You can scale it up to be pretty much as big as you want it to be by pressing S, but this is about the right size for me. But now we have a problem. From the underneath, you can see that these two objects are clipping into each other. This is because they are on the same level as each other, so you can select it and press G and Z to move it down, and Control to move it in steps. Now you've got your background and your Blender logo, but we need to give it a colour first, so press New. And you can name this Backdrop if you want to. Now you can go into the colour menu, and with the eyedropper you can select the central circle's colour as the base colour, and then change the values a bit until they look good to you. This is completely your personal choice, and I just happen to choose this particular colour. By the way, I will have all of the hex tones that I used linked in the description so that you can use the exact same colours as me if you want. Now that we have a logo and our background, we need a way to view it. So you can press Shift A and go down to Camera, and once you add that, you will see that it is actually not facing straight downwards, so you can press N to bring up this little menu in the corner here, and you see here, you can click on that and drag straight down and delete all of them and press 0. This will make your camera face straight down, as you can see. And now you can go and press on this little camera logo here, which will bring you to the camera view. You can see now that the camera can't see anything because it's pointing straight at the background. And make sure that you've got your camera selected. You can press G and Z to move it backwards. And this should move it above the logo so that you can see it. But now we have a problem. Our camera is not a square, it's a rectangle. And so you can change that by going down into here, into the output properties, and changing these pixels here. As you can see that the aspect ratio is 1:1. You can change the pixels to the same number, in this case 2000. But now we have a different problem. The camera is too big. You can solve this by selecting the camera and pressing G and Z again and moving it back down. This is completely your own choice again, but I prefer it to be a little closer to the logo. Something like this should be fine. Now that we've finished framing, we can move on to lighting, so we can go into rendered view mode, and as you can see, we can't see anything because we don't have any lights, which means we need to add some. So press Shift A again, and go down to Lights, and select Area. This should add a small area light, and you can scale this up by pressing S. Something like this should be fine. And now you can move that up by pressing G and Z. And now you can go back into the camera view mode so that you can change the output of the light. I usually start on about 0.1 watts, which you can see is way too much, so maybe you can go down to 1 milliwatt, which seems about right. But of course the lighting is also up to your opinion, and you may need to use different output strength for the scale you're modelling in. Now that you've finished the lighting, you need to go into your render settings and change from Eevee to cycles. It might take a second to load, but that's completely fine. Changing the settings should make your renders look a lot nicer. Now you're pretty much ready to render, but if you do have a good GPU, you can change the CPU to GPU compute. The last thing we want to change is our max samples. You should change that from 4096 to something more reasonable like 20. This will significantly shorten your render times. Now you should be ready to render, so press the render button in the corner and render image. And now we just need to wait for the finished result. Here's the end result, and I think it came out pretty well. If you've got any questions, leave a comment, and as always, have fun. Goodbye.